So I just got back from DC, Washington, DC. And so I'm excited to be here in Rome. But in DC, we had a very interesting we had some interesting meetings on the margins of the spring meeting. So I was not there for the spring meetings, but on the margins of the spring meetings, we had a diaspora investment roundtable. That was very exciting. We brought together hundreds of Kenyan diaspora, primarily living in DC, but also from around the broader US. And we were just discussing or getting deeper into conversations around diaspora investment. What are some things that diaspora need to be thinking about? But importantly for this particular event, we had diaspora who've actually done some big investments in Kenya speaking about their experiences. So people who've invested in a hospital, somebody else who's in tech, and all of these different things. People who are working on various value chains, whether it is food security, avocados, I think came up. Offshoring of services, labor mobility, and so on. And so they all got to talk about their experiences investing in Kenya. We had the Central Bank of Kenya there. They were actually the sponsor for the event. And so they spoke a little bit about, went in depth into remittances and what that actually means for Kenya, what resilient cash flows that come from the diaspora have actually meant for stabilizing our exchange rate and for our export cover and so on. But also now we began deeper conversations around then how people can use the 𝐊𝐶SD tool that's available on your phone to invest directly into government treasury bills and treasury bonds. What came out of that meeting, I think for me, the takeaway really is that we need to do more of that. So usually a lot of our diaspora engagements have been town halls, sort of where people talk about their issues, or it will be a political meeting or that kind of thing. But there's need for us to do those sort of deeper verticals where we, sort of go in depth into investment, and it can even be investment in one specific area. The other thing that came up from there is that there's need for us to have deeper conversations about diaspora in trade. So how do we use diaspora as a pool for Kenyan goods and services into their new communities, but also how do we get them to own the entire value chain, so that we're talking about they're working with, say, Kenyan producers at home to produce avocados. Somebody else is, again, Kenyans working in the, let's say, processing, the export, but also now on the US side, and this is what we're discussing, then owning the warehouses and the distribution chains and so on. So we need to do some more work around diaspora in trade and seeing how we can entrench that. We also need to do deeper verticals like, diaspora in creative economy. So there is need for us to stop, not to stop, but to deepen the work that we've already been doing, which has been very broad, but now to sort of pick up certain verticals, especially around the better pillars, and just decide how do we deepen conversations with that. And diaspora are very excited about this. They have wanted for a long time to invest back home. They have wanted clearer channels for investment back home. And we have the 𝐊𝐶SD, we have treasury bills and bonds. We are still talking about the diaspora bond. Of course, there are the usual things, real estate and so on. But this, I think, is important because we can actually we can deepen that kind of work. And that's one of the things that came out of that. Of course, we got to just have the other usual conversations around services. We kicked off mobile consular services that are ongoing now in Seattle, in Kansas, in Dallas, I think. And we have teams in those places sort of offering those services. And we expect to serve thousands of Kenyans over the weekend and this week. Yeah, that was the US. It was a lot of fun.